Well, day 293 of the war in Gaza, and amid renewed fighting in Khan Yunis, IDF forces rescued the bodies of 5 Israeli hostages taken captive on October 7th. The bodies of 5 Israeli hostages taken captive on October 7th were recovered by troops operating in the southern Gaza Strip and brought back to Israel. The remains were located in Khan Yunis and were recovered by troops, including special forces under the IDF's 98th Division and Shin Bet agents, and comes amid an ongoing offensive in the southern Gaza City. The 5 were identified as Ravid Katz, age 51, Oren Golden, 33, Maya Goren, 56, Sergeant Kirill Brudsky, 19, and Staff Sergeant Tomer Yaakov Achimas, age 20. They were all previously declared dead by the IDF. All 5 were murdered on October 7th, and their bodies were dragged into Gaza by Hamas-led terrorists. According to a statement, Shin Bet interrogations of detained terrorists allowed troops to reach the site in Khan Yunis and recover the bodies. Meanwhile, 98th Division paratroopers and commandos eliminated a number of terrorists and destroyed approximately 50 terror infrastructures during the operation in Khan Yunis area in recent days. More than 60 terrorist targets were attacked by fighter jets, helicopter gunships, and Air Force aircraft throughout Gaza over the past 24 hours. In separate security incidents, the IDF said it has launched a manhunt for a terrorist behind a drive-by shooting attack today in Samaria. 3 Israelis were reportedly wounded when gunmen opened fire on their car on Route 55 near the village of Nabi Ilyas. And in the north, a suspected drone entered Israeli airspace from Lebanon and was shot down by air defense over the Baram area. Another suspected drone was shot down by air defense over the sea just off the coast of Nahariya. There were no injuries in the incidents. Well, joining us now via Zoom is Brigadier General Amir Avivi, founder and CEO of the Israel Defense and Security Forum. General, operating at Khan Yunis, the IDF located and returned the bodies of 5 Israelis murdered October 7th, and their bodies had been taken to Gaza. What's involved in such an operation? Does it start with intelligence?
So yes, it definitely starts with intelligence, and mostly human intelligence. The IDF has arrested thousands of Hamas terrorists, and they've been interrogated, and through these interrogations and also findings on the ground, the Shin Bet and the army are able to create the relevant intelligence that enables to really do this kind of operation and retrieve the bodies of soldiers and citizens that have been murdered brutally on the 7th of October. It's not the first operation we see. We have seen also, of course, the rescue of live hostages. And the more the IDF will control the area, the more intelligence will come, and we'll have more opportunities to conduct operations like that.
Well, we seem to control most of the area already. Noa Argamoni was freed in a dramatic rescue operation. The Prime Minister even brought her with him to the address last night in Congress. But precious few have been rescued alive. Many more returned in the first exchange deal with Hamas. Isn't there more chance at this point of returning live hostages and bodies through an exchange agreement?
Well, it completely depends on Hamas, unlike really the kind of propaganda that we see trying to say that Israel is the problem. Israel is not the problem. Israel has set very, very clear red lines, what it can agree to and what not. And the issue is, how do you get Hamas to be pressured enough to agree to a deal? And if Hamas is not agreeing to a deal, it means we haven't pressured enough. We need to expand the operation. We need to attack firstly in Rafah, in Khan Yunis, until we get Sinwar to really a situation where he feels pressured enough that is willing to have a ceasefire that will let him, organize, and with this ceasefire, release as many hostages as possible.
Well, General, we get mixed signals because we hear Gallant, the defense minister, saying quite clearly that the time is right for an exchange deal. We hear heads of the security establishment saying the same. The IDF says that only 116 hostages now remain in Gaza, both living and dead. To the best of your knowledge, how many remain alive?
Well, we don't know exact numbers, but we assume that maybe half are alive and not more. And yes, we need to try and rescue them as soon as possible and have a deal, but this deal cannot be a deal that endangers the whole society, Israel, the South, and therefore this deal cannot include leaving Philadelphia. And by the way, if you have a deal where the IDF pulls out of Philadelphia and there is a ceasefire, and we get only part of the hostages, we might find dozens of hostages that will be moved from Gaza to Iran. This is not a reality we can agree to. So even looking at only the hostages, looking at their interests, we need to look at the interest of the whole group and not just part of the hostages. And therefore, retreating from Philadelphia, it's not an option.
Hostages potentially moved to Iran. We're going to have to leave it with that. General, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed a bipartisan gathering of both houses of the U.S. Congress for a record fourth time, and he laid out his vision for a regional anti-Iran alliance. Netanyahu failed to commit to the hostages deal pending his White House meeting with President Biden, which will happen a short time from now. After entering Congress to a standing ovation, Netanyahu told the U.S. lawmakers that just as an alliance was formed after World War II to counter the Soviet threat, so too America and Israel must forge a security alliance to counter the growing Iranian security threat.
We meet today at a crossroads of history. Our world is in upheaval. In the Middle East, Iran's axis of terror confronts America, Israel, and our Arab friends. This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization.
Netanyahu received numerous standing ovations from the U.S. lawmakers, although many Democrats absented themselves to protest Israeli policies in the war in Gaza. Netanyahu said that the U.S., its Israeli partners, and Israel can transform the Middle East and confront the Iranian aggression together. Netanyahu vowed to bring all of the hostages home and said efforts were underway, but did not commit to the mediated deal on the table in Doha.
As we speak, we're actively engaged in intensive efforts to secure their release, and I'm confident that these efforts can succeed. Some of them are taking place right now.
The Prime Minister mentioned but gave few details on his vision for a post-war Gaza.
The day after we defeat Hamas, a new Gaza can emerge. My vision for that day is of a demilitarized and de-radicalized Gaza. Israel does not seek to resettle Gaza, but for the foreseeable future, we must retain overriding security control there to prevent the resurgence of terror, to ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel.
Netanyahu said that to win the war, Israel needs the U.S. to fast-track weapons.
I deeply appreciate America's support, including in this current war. But this is an exceptional moment. Fast-tracking U.S. military aid can dramatically expedite an end to the war in Gaza and help prevent a broader war in the Middle East. After meeting President Biden, Netanyahu is due to meet Vice President and likely U.S. presidential candidate Kamala Harris, who was not in Washington for his address. Extending his trip, Netanyahu will later fly to Mar-a-Lago to meet former President and Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. He will fly home to Israel on Saturday night. And joining us now from Washington are two veteran correspondents, Ron Campius, the Washington bureau chief for JTA, and Michael Schnell, a congressional reporter for The Hill. Ron, I'd like to start with you. You've covered many Netanyahu visits to Washington, including speeches to Congress. How do you compare this one, and what, in your view, was his central message?
Well, that's the thing. He didn't have the message he had last time, 2015, which was to say that basically that President Obama's Iran policy was misguided. And even though that was a negative message and that had blowback because of that, at least there was a message here. Here, the message was just the U.S.-Israel relationship is vital. Israel is fighting a just war, and if anything, I think he kind of turned off some Democrats by venturing into domestic political politics by being very. I mean, he praised Biden, but he praised Biden as a leader that was going out, and he was very, very enthusiastic about Donald Trump, and he also ventured into the kind of politics I think that everybody in that chamber, maybe there are a lot of people who didn't attend, but would have agreed with, but didn't like hearing from him, which was to criticize campus protests, to go after the presidents of Ivy League universities, that kind of thing. So there wasn't a message. There was just a very vague outline for a post-war scenario that would envision some kind of NATO-like alliance with Arab countries in the region that are friendly and that have the potential to be friendly, but nothing concrete. He had nothing to say for the families of hostages in the room who were looking for him to say that there was a deal coming out of the negotiations. So there was no real central message, except, of course, the message that Israeli leaders always want to convey, which is that the alliance is essential to both sides.
All right, Michael, many Democratic lawmakers chose to not attend the meeting to protest against Netanyahu policies. Was it a very significant number? And did he have bipartisan support during those many standing ovations?
Yeah, well, Steve, I counted just over about 100 House Democrats in that chamber, and you do the math. There are 212 House Democrats currently serving. So it was a fairly significant number of Democrats who did not attend. And look, a number of them had been very adamant before the speech that they would not be in attendance, noting their criticisms of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's conservative policies and also his handling of the war in Gaza. We also saw some Senate Democrats not attend, though there was one House Democrat very critical of Netanyahu who was in the audience. That was Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, a Democrat from Michigan. And during the speech, she held up a sign. It had two sides. One side said war criminal and one side said guilty of genocide. Now, I was in the House chamber during the speech, and my seat was right above where Tlaib was sitting. And you can see that during every standing ovation, she did not participate. She also frequently raised that sign. So that all goes to say that there was both discontent with Netanyahu outside of the House chamber, but also within. Though you mentioned the question about standing ovations, there were several throughout the day, throughout the roughly 50-minute speech, a number of them bipartisan, but there were still some outliers there of people who boycotted the speech and even those who just weren't supportive inside the chamber.
All right, well, just a short time from now, and I'll go to you now, Ron. A short time from now, Netanyahu will finally get his White House meeting with President Biden. Are you expecting that confrontational come-to-Jesus moment that Biden referred to, or would you expect a picture of unity?
I think that it's going to be a tough talk, and there are two reasons for that, why I think that. First of all, Biden's on his way out. He said last night in his speech saying that he's going to see out his final 6 months as president, that a priority is ending the war. And now he's a lame duck. He's a free agent. He can pressure Netanyahu in ways that he didn't have to think. He doesn't have to think about electoral aspects of pressuring Netanyahu right now.
So a tough meeting. A tough meeting's expected with Biden. But before we run out of time, I wanted to ask Michael this. Netanyahu is planning to make a pilgrimage to former President Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago tomorrow. I know it's hard to predict anything with Trump, but what kind of a meeting are you expecting between them?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of hit it on the nose right there, Steve. It's hard to predict, but we do know that former President Trump has been a very strong ally to Israel and to Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu gave Trump a shout out during his speech yesterday for those Abraham Accords and for moving the capital of Israel back to Jerusalem. So they do have a close relationship. But what I thought was interesting, the split screen here, is that Netanyahu may be going to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Trump, but you're showing the picture of him on the screen right now. One notable absence from the speech yesterday was Senator J.D. Vance, who was recently selected to be Trump's running mate. J.D. Vance, known to have a more isolationist, populist view of foreign policy. So I'm interested to see how the ticket fleshes out its stance on foreign policy, especially in relationship to Israel, considering that you have on one hand Trump, a very strong ally of Netanyahu in Israel, and J.D. Vance on the other hand, isolationist and didn't attend Netanyahu's speech. He said he was campaigning in Virginia. As you know, Virginia not very far from Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and I heard that he was busy at a hillbilly convention. That's why he couldn't make it. But Ron, very quickly, there were protests in Washington. Did they peter out? Did they not amount to what we were fearing?
No, they were pretty intense. There were a lot of them, and especially near the Capitol around Union Station. But I think what happened was security was just really, really good and efficient yesterday. We were chatting even with the Capitol police officer who kind of indicated that this was a lot better than January 6th in terms of preparation.
All right, guys,
So
I'm sorry I have to cut it off there only because we're out of time. January 6th. Since January 6th, this was the toughest security because of Netanyahu's visit. Thank you both so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
And now let's go to ILTV correspondent Devo Klein for a roundup of the notable figures attending Prime Minister Netanyahu's congressional address. Devo, what can you tell us?
Right. Hi, Steve. Now, while several Democratic lawmakers chose to boycott the event in protest, Prime Minister Netanyahu received multiple standing ovations from the majority of officials who were in the room. He called out of a number of special people he brought with him from Israel, and there were several stars in the chamber as well. So let's just dive in real quick to who was there and what happened. In his address to the United States Congress last night, Netanyahu took a moment to address Noah Argamani, the 26-year-old student who was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival on October 7th and who was rescued from Gaza in a heroic Yamam and police force operation. Argamani, who was sitting next to Netanyahu's wife, Sarah, received a standing ovation from the crowd. Shortly after, Netanyahu remembered Arnon Zamora, the Yamam fighter and only casualty from the daring operation. One row in front of Argamani were the representatives of the families of American hostages still being held captive by Hamas terrorists. Playing into the hands and minds of the Democrats, Netanyahu brought with him to the White House a mosaic of Israeli soldiers, including Ethiopian immigrant Lieutenant Avichai Reuven, who ran 8 miles to the Gaza border to help protect the Gaza envelope residents who were under attack. There was also Bedouin soldier Master Sergeant Ashraf al-Bakhiri from the Israeli Muslim community of Rahat, and Lieutenant Asa Sofer, who is still recovering from his injuries. And finally, Lieutenant Jonathan Ben Hamel, who lost a leg in fighting. Also in the House chamber was tech billionaire and Tesla chief Elon Musk, who was invited to Capitol Hill as a personal guest of Netanyahu. Next to Musk, British author and political commentator Douglas Murray was also in attendance, later tweeting that he was grateful to be invited. And despite icy tensions lately, Democratic Representative Chuck Schumer attended Netanyahu's address and even gave the prime minister a head nod of support. Despite raging protests outside the House, Netanyahu received a total of 52 standing ovations as he addressed Congress in what is already being dubbed a momentous event.
In a world full of stories, whose voice will you trust? At ILTV, we deliver the truth from the heart of Israel and bring you the latest from Israel with integrity and passion. Join a community that believes in the strength and resilience of Israel. Your support means reliable, honest news direct from the source. Subscribe now. Be part of the story. Be part of Israel. And moving to the north, let's hear from Emily Schrader, who is currently near the northern border with Lebanon in a kibbutz that just suffered a direct hit following a Hezbollah rocket attack.
Emily Schrader here for ILTV. We are close to the northern border where there has been so much activity from Hezbollah, proxy of the Islamic Republic, across the border with almost daily rocket fire, missiles, mortar fire from over the border, as well as attempted infiltrations with UAVs. We're here in Kibbutz Dafna today. I've been speaking to some of the residents, some who have remained here, some who have come back, despite the fact that tens of thousands of Israelis have been evacuated from this very area. In fact, the kibbutz I'm in right now has approximately 60 people still remaining inside of the kibbutz out of 1,200. So we're talking about under 10% of the population who has remained here, and that's been the case for over 9 months and counting. Many of the residents have expressed frustration with the state of affairs and the fact that the government hasn't been able to secure that sense of security and restore the residents to their homes. Let's take a look at some of the sites we visited today and some of the sites here within Kibbutz Dafna that were even affected by direct rocket fire, including, at least in one instance, a school.
Well, the government of Israel, in my opinion, failed by the decision to evacuate us away from our home, and worst, failed to bring us back to our homes in the last almost 10 months. There is plenty of IDF soldiers around the Israeli-Lebanese border, and we are, as the residents, we need action. We want to come back to our normal life. We want to live, and I think it's a basic demand. We want to be living here in our homes, not to be afraid to send our children to schools and to their classes and to their gardens, and to walk away in this path of this kibbutz free. And we demand it from the government of Israel. Until now, we haven't seen it. We want our residents, approximately 60,000 human beings, to come back to live their normal life.
A 10-year-old Israeli boy is in critical condition after contracting a rare brain-eating amoeba at Guy Beach Water Park in Tiberias. The Ministry of Health has closed the park and urges visitors with symptoms to seek medical attention immediately. ILTV's editor-in-chief, Mayan Hoffman, has more.
A 10-year-old Israeli boy is in the intensive care unit at Ziv Medical Center in Sfat after contracting a rare brain-eating amoeba. An epidemiological investigation by the Ministry of Health confirmed the boy developed encephalitis and is on a ventilator after coming in contact with Naegleria fowleri, also known as the brain-eating amoeba, at Guy Beach Water Park in Tiberias. That is the same location where a 25-year-old man contracted the disease earlier this month. He was treated at Beilinson Hospital, but died. The ministry ordered the park to close right away. Environmental health inspectors checked the beach after the first case was reported, but they didn't find any initial signs of amoeba contamination. The amoeba, which thrives in warm waters between 35 and 42 degrees Celsius, is usually harmless to swimmers. However, in rare instances, it can cause infection. The ministry has requested that a person who has been to the water park and experienced one or more of the following symptoms, fever, headache, blurred vision, or vomiting, go to the nearest hospital's emergency room. This morning, Emek Medical Center reported that 20 adults and children had visited the hospital due to concerns of infection after spending the last few days near the Sea of Galilee. However, all the patients were found healthy. The mortality rate for encephalitis caused by the amoeba is extremely high. Although infections are rare, with only about 400 cases reported globally, it is often fatal. This is the third case of amoeba infection in Israel. In 2022, a 36-year-old died from a brain infection caused by the same amoeba.
And in a sharp turn, the official opening of the Olympic Games in Paris will only be held tomorrow night, but the team sports competitions are already underway. Under heavy security, the Israeli national soccer team played Mali to a 1-1 draw in its opening match. The team will next face Paraguay and then Japan to determine whether they will advance in the Olympic tournament. 88 athletes will represent Israel, competing in 15 different sports. Israeli Olympic officials have high expectations, hoping to match or beat the 4 medals won at the Tokyo Games, which were Israel's most successful ever. The officials have said that they hope and expect to bring home 4 or 5 medals overall from the Paris Games, and expect to see Israeli athletes qualify for between 15 and 18 finals. Let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of about 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And then tomorrow, sunny skies and hot weather are expected as temperatures reach highs of 34 degrees Celsius or 93 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures will rise over the weekend. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all of your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Steve Leibowitz. Be well, and thanks so much for watching.